Good morning, everybody. It's Andrew's Corner here with another episode of the Podcasters of Vandan. Last week, if some of you were lucky to catch the podcast interview that I did with the original author of the Vandan series, Malaka, if you haven't heard it yet, check it out. Today, we have a very special guest. We have one of the co-authors of, I believe it was Chronicles of Vandan, The Invasion, and also the Chronicles of Vandan, Far From Home. And I think he's also writing a little bit of another series, I believe. It's Sylvie's Travels. This author, I gotta say, I think he matches Malaka's writing perfectly. And a lot of times sometimes you can tell, like, when two authors collaborate on a story, like you can kind of tell which ones are kind of, which words are the authors, which ones are like the new authors. Like you can tell writers apart. Actually, I need to clarify. I was actually told by him that the proper way to pronounce his name, I believe it's Acrophite. I should probably have known that beforehand. The way it was pronounced, the way it was spelled. I just kept calling him Acrophite. So I'll try my best to pronounce Acrophite. Like not to confuse his names and everything like that. But hey, sometimes it happens, like sometimes you see something, you mess up a name, it happens, we're not perfect. So all those who are listening, let's welcome Acrophite. Is this Acrophite?
Yes.
Hey, good morning. How's it going?
Morning. Yeah, it's going pretty well so far.
The only thing bad about it is I wish it was not so cloudy. I wish it was bright and sunny, as spring is supposed to be.
Yeah, it's been looking at the forecast for where I'm at, and it's just cloudy every day. And even though it's nice and warm out, it's like, yeah, I'd rather have some sun.
The funny thing about this is we've the past couple of weeks, and at least in my neighborhood, we've had a couple snowfall or hail fall, and I'm looking at that. It's like, is that normal to happen in April? I'm like, what the heck are you thinking, Mother Nature?
Right.
If you don't mind me asking you, Acrophite, where are you from?
Yeah, I'm from Indiana.
I just had a bit of a brain fart just now because actually I think whether it was looking at like your bio or talking to you previously, I think I should have known that you were from Indiana. Didn't you go to Ball State?
Yes, I did actually. Yeah.
I can't believe I completely blocked that out from my mind. Like I should have known. Like I remember like hearing that someplace, whether I talked to you, whether I saw it on your bio. Like, what the heck? I should know this.
Right. Yeah, I think I remember that coming up somewhere. I don't know if it's in my bio or maybe I commented it at some point. Who knows?
But it's nice to meet a fellow Cardinal. Chirp chirp.
Oh yeah, chirp.
Well, let me try to rephrase the question then. Do you live in Muncie or where are you originally from in Indiana?
Yeah, specifically Muncie. I've been here for quite a while.
I mean, even though a lot of people often say that Muncie, there's not really much in Muncie. I think while I was down there during my college years, I kind of liked the atmosphere, at least with campus, like going certain places, like to the theaters, the stores, the malls, and everything. I think there's a lot that people often overlook when it comes to like small Midwestern like towns, kind of like Muncie, kind of like the higher Northwestern areas and everything.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, campus is beautiful. I've been with my friends. We'll just go walk around campus and visit the places that are around there, like the bookstores and the village where they got all the restaurants you can go to, and then yeah, like you said, like the mall. Even though the mall's a little bit more dead now, it's still fun to go to. So yeah, there's plenty around here. It's not as great as some bigger places, but like as it is, it's nice.
Since you reside in Muncie, do you often take time to visit campus, or do you see it very often?
Oh yeah, I live very close to it actually, so I see it quite often, and I've got plenty of friends who are from there as well. So uh, many times we'll just go there and they'll show us their classrooms. We'll walk them there, or just kind of go hang out there with them on lunch or something. You know.
Yeah, ever since I graduated, I think I visited twice or three times, but I kind of wanted to, like maybe try to go down there for whenever they invite like alumni for homecoming and everything. My wife is from BSU too, so and I
Okay.
actually proposed to her in front of Beneficence when we when we were dating, so it kind of
Oh,
has a
that's
special place
awesome.
in my heart.
Right, right.
But yeah, I miss that place. I kind of wish we were able to visit it more often.
Hmm.
Anyway, I'm pretty sure people aren't really interested in hearing about our BSU experiences. Why don't we? First of all, I'm really appreciative that you agreed to do this. This was an idea I had for a while, and I thought if I could get the authors, Malaka and Acrophite included, I think that would be a really good start. The people who've read these books, the stories, who love these stories, I think it'd be awesome to like have their takes, their experiences from writing, and maybe share a little bit about themselves.
Right, right. Yeah. Uh, it's funny because I hadn't been on Giantess World in quite a bit, and then I went in there to look at reviews. I'm like, oh, I better check, see what people have said. I saw your thing. I'm like, oh, well, this sounds really cool because I just love talking about this with people, but I don't really talk to people about it in real life that much. So just getting the chance to share my love for it openly, it's like really nice. It's not something I get to do often.
Yeah, it does kind of make sense that, not a lot of people, like including myself, wouldn't really be as open about this theme or this idea. And I hear from a lot of people that they often feel, like it's a very weird topic to like bring up or like talk about. Like I think a lot of people just don't really understand it, like whether it's a story beat thing, whether it's like maybe because I know a lot of people in the giantess community sometimes like fetishize it a lot, and I understand that. I respect that, and I think a lot of times a lot of people just don't really take the time to understand like what it is exactly that people like about it. Like, why do we write about it? Why is it a good story idea?
Right, yeah. And me, I grew up in a Christian household, and I still am a Christian, but it's a that's a whole another aspect because a lot of the stuff you see it just isn't going to fly with the people I hang out with. So, like when I was younger, like I didn't know about incognito mode and stuff like that. So these sites that are very much adult content kind of stuff. I wasn't digging into adult content, but it was still mixed with that. So my parents took it as like, oh, what's he doing? Oh, we gotta crack down on this, and like it caused me to be a lot more secretive. But these days, I understand it a lot more now, and like people get it more now, so it's easier. But it's still something I mostly keep to myself.
It makes sense, because, with it, being your secret, it kind of makes it all the more precious, if you will, like something, very personal, something that, not a lot of people, I would think don't really get to understand or get to enjoy, like, like when I came across these stories years ago, it was almost like a gold mine because I've never read anything like this before. Like I know that there's some stories, that feature giants or giantesses, but not really in this magnitude. I think the most popular one Malaka mentioned was Gulliver's Travels, but I don't think many people I don't think a lot of people remember that there were that there was a giantess land there was a giant land there besides the town of little people, Lilliput, I guess the name of it was called.
Right, yeah. And I think like size changing in giantess characters are a bit more prevalent in like comic books like Marvel and DC, but even then, it's not like the kind of stories you would find, such as the Vandan series, where it's more gentle stuff. They're changing size, they're fighting crime, or maybe they're villains, but it's still a little bit different than what you get to see here.
Something I wanted to ask you, Acrophite, was when did you first get exposed to Giantess content? Were you pretty young, or was it fairly recent for you?
Yeah, I was actually pretty young. The movie Monsters versus Aliens, if you're familiar with it.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, that was the first time I remember being like, whoa, this is like something pretty fascinating. Like, I want to check out more of this, which led to Attack of the 50-Foot Woman from, I think, the 1990 remake or 1993, whenever that was. And then just down the rabbit hole.
I do have to say, like, even though there are some, well-known giantesses in film and fiction, like the 50-Foot Woman, Nancy Archer, obviously. Monsters versus Aliens, I think, kind of did it, which I thought was really cool. It's like they get to expose like younger audiences, like to an idea of, maybe what a friendly giantess might be like, instead of like the typical, vicious monster fee fi fo fum from fairy tales and everything.
Right, right.
And I have to say this because I don't say it often, but I really feel like the movie Monsters vs. Aliens missed out on a cool and awesome idea if her fiance or soon to be husband, if he stuck around with her. Like, how would that work out? Like, like maybe highlight the drama, the the issue there. But instead, I get it. They made him a jerk and everything. But I thought, how cool of an idea would that be? Like, try to explore that. Try to make it PG if you could. But how cool of an idea would that have been? I think that was my idea, the beginning of my idea, my appreciation of how cool would it be if they were in an actual functional working relationship.
Yeah, and I feel like if they had ever made a sequel, they probably would have gone into that a little bit more. But I I don't think the movie did quite as well as some of their other properties like Shrek, or How to Train Your Dragon, so it kind of just got lost in there. But also, I think the potential they could have had with that movie just it wasn't great either. I mean, some of the stuff is cool that they do with her, but there's actually someone rewrote the whole movie to be much more like realistic with how she would take being a giantess, and it's really good. It's quite a good remake. It's called God Save the Queen. I think I don't know where it's at. I'd have to find it, but it's really good. It digs into her thought process through everything, and it makes it a little more realistic. It's pretty good.
God Save the Queen.
I think that's what it's called. Yeah,
I might have to check that out.
yeah. It's pretty interesting. I haven't got through all of it, but like, it really digs into like at first how terrified she is, but then slowly how she starts to accept it and even love it.
That's one of the things I find really cool about the idea. How, I mean, you could argue that it was done in Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. The woman gradually becomes more empowering, accepting her size and everything else. And if anything, I think it's a very natural way of empowering a character, I should say, because sometimes, depending on how well a character is written and how much backstory you give, it could be a very rocky transition. Like, I'm quiet, I'm meek, oh, suddenly I'm powerful. But this, I think, it makes a lot of sense. Like, nothing can bring you down. There might be some challenges along the way, but I think it's a really great empowering tool to give to like those kinds of characters. It feels more natural when they do that.
Oh, definitely. And something that I'd like to do in a future story of mine is to dig into like morality behind some of the stuff they would do, because you see a lot of stories where they suddenly just go evil, and at some level you can get that because they suddenly have this power trip. They can do
Yeah.
whatever they want. But I'd kind of like to make a story where, like, maybe someone has that urge to do it, but it's like they're still human, and it goes into, maybe the story goes into, like, what does it mean to be human? Just because they're taller and stronger and just different from everyone else now, does that give them the right to do whatever they want?
Yeah, I really like that questioning. Like you can see that, they're not just mindless monsters. I think it was addressed somewhere in either the first book or one of Malaka's stories where they say to the characters, I'm human just like you, even though I am, very bigger. I'm taller than a mountain. And I think that's something important to highlight. And I love how Malaka like dove into the idea of a very gentle, like thinking giant. It's not like, oh, I'm just bloodthirsty, blah 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 blah.
Right, right.
Speaking of the Vandan stories, I really have to ask you this: when did you first come across the Vandan stories?
Oh man. See, well, when you sent me that question before, I spent the remember. I know it was early on. It had to have been, because I think I remember kind of tracking Chronicles of Vandan, the invasion, and like watching it come out slowly, and then it stopped, and I was like, "Uh-oh, what's going on?" But then I just kind of forgot about it for a while. So I think it probably. Let me see if I can actually find it. Um, when was that posted? That was posted in 2014. Yeah, that sounds about right. That
Yeah,
sounds about right
I think
for
so.
when I was really starting to read a bunch of stories on the websites like this. So, yeah, it's probably been 8 years now that I've been invested in these stories.
Yeah, that was around the same time that I came across his stories. And I gotta say, like, after reading the first four chapters of The Princess of Vandan, like, I just fell in love with the story, especially chapter 4 when Valerie saves Alban from the bandit horde and confesses her love to him, and they have that moment. I love that moment because, pardon me, to me, it represents forgiveness. I think how you're with Alban all this time. You see what his mindset is. He's kind of a jerk to her at first. He's regretful that he lost his friends, and Valerie could like stand by her frustration. It's like, hey, I'm annoyed with you. I just saved you, but like you can feel the amount of love she has, even though she doesn't understand it herself. And it's almost a moment of like, no matter what you did, I still love you. I love you for you, like warts and all. And I think that was a huge moment of realization for Alban, where he's like, if she loves me for who I am, maybe I need to forgive myself, love myself for who I am. And I just really love that moment. It's like she really became a goddess, like a true forgiving goddess, or the closest we can get to meeting gods or goddesses.
Right, right. Yeah, I definitely recall like reading through that and being like, man, she's just a lot different from most of the giantesses I read in these stories. But I think I'd read one of his other stories before then, so I was kind of used to him having, this gentle, more caring kind of person. I think it was the Out of the Woods, which I think was the first series I ran across for him. Uh, but obviously, Vandan is the one that I've fallen in love with more.
Yeah, I love that story too. Out of the Woods. I think I actually did a version of that on my YouTube channel also. That was when I
Yeah.
was narrating for everybody, even the female characters, and I had no sound effects, nothing else. And I feel like I'm gonna have to redo that, or maybe try the sequels by doing that eventually.
Right, right. Yeah, that'd be neat.
I don't know how much time I'm gonna have with that though, because we have a baby on the way, and I think that's gonna take up most of my time. Like I'll probably be away from my YouTube channel for quite a while, at least a year, perhaps.
Right.
If you don't mind me asking you, what would you say is your favorite story of Malaka's? It could be either the Van Dan series, or it could be maybe another story that he's wrote.
Oh yeah, easily Children of Vandan. That one, I distinctly remember. Like I enjoyed Princess of Vandan. It was good, but it didn't hit me as hard as Children of Vandan did. I mean, obviously it's the longest one,
Right.
and you get to meet the children, and Belina is just favorite character out of all of them. Getting to see first like her as a child, like interacting with people, and then later on, just seeing her emotional roller coaster of meeting like Argo, and then just going through this coming of age, and the same with Sylvie. Like, yeah, she's annoying at first, but she really grows a lot in that story. And Valden as well. Like I was just impressed with all three of them, and it was the first story I'd ever read on there where I was like, man, this was really good.
It's funny you mention that, because not only do I think a lot of people who read the series, that story in particular, agree that Sylvie at first was the worst, like, just being so childish and mean, treating Valden like that. And I think when I read the story, like, I was excited, like, I get to see more of, Alba and Valerie, the kids. That's a very interesting idea. But a part of me was like thinking, I kind of want to focus more on Alban and Valerie. Like, what happened with them? How are they doing? But the way Malaka writes, I just got hooked with the children. It's like, hey, these are good arcs for them. Like like you just can't help but appreciate them as characters for the journeys that they've gone on.
Right, yeah, yeah. I think I do remember thinking that at first as well. Like, I wonder what the parents are doing. I'd kind of like to hear from them instead of Sylvie being a brat. But then as the story went on, I was like, okay, actually, this is pretty good. And she reminds me of Ahsoka from the Clone Wars series. Because when they introduced her, everyone hated her because she was this brat. She was not great. And even looking back, I'm like, man, this is not easy to watch. But now Ahsoka is one of the most beloved characters in Star Wars. She's getting her own live action stuff. She's been in multiple series. Like, and I think that's kind of what Sylvie went through there. Maybe not quite to that extent, but now she has her own story that's in the works. That's, I think, halfway done by now. So I think I hope people have come around to her by now.
I hope so too. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense that at the beginning they would start out as, I don't know if you consider it annoying, or I wouldn't say hate, but there's something, off about them. Everybody has flaws. Like, it's something that people can relate to. And at first, you're not really there. But I think that's why it's so important to follow them throughout their journeys, like read more of the stories to see how they grow. Because mind you, Sylvie's still a teenager. She's still growing. She's learning about the world. And I love that Malaka, gave them different personalities. Like, maybe Belina is a little bit more like sensitive, maybe a little bit more timid and cautious. But with her, she's kind of like a wild card, like it's not just the same, oh, she's a copy of Belina. Oh, she's a copy of Valerie. Like, you have to give them different personalities. But anyway, like I was saying, I love the growth of the characters. It got me hooked on them too.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll definitely echo that. Like, I'm glad that they have these very different personalities. So it's not just these one-tone characters. And it's like, they're all very unique. Valerie, is very unique. Belena's unique, and Sylvie's unique. They all have their own personalities. They're all very fleshed out. Yeah, it's every single character in these stories I absolutely love.
Is there a character from that series that you love most of all? Like one that you love more than the others?
Definitely Belena, which I would definitely like to write another story centered on her, which I have pitched to him already. But it's not like I don't like writing about the other characters. I've really enjoyed
Right.
Sylvie's travels far more than I thought I would. But Belena, I'd really like to do one with her.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited for you to finish Sylvie's travels. Not to put pressure on you or anything, but I love
Oh, no,
how you're expanding on the land and the characters and the stories. Like, I mean, I think we've seen like mountainous settings. You know, we've seen other like kingdoms, but I don't think anybody's ever, you know, like dove into like the sea, pirates, villages, the poor towns and countries or areas surrounding Vandan. And I think your characters, like Roth, and the dynamic he has between Sylvie, it's different. You know, you think, oh, maybe they're gonna get together and fall in love, but it's like maybe they're not. You know, like it's a fresh dynamic that you kind of want to see where it goes.
yeah, and that's why I've enjoyed it the most so far because, yeah, Roth, he's not exactly fully my character. He's the only part of the story that Malaka wanted in there. He had an idea for who he would be, but he didn't really have any ideas for what he would do or anything else other than, oh yeah, they're gonna like each other eventually, but right now, definitely not. But just the whole pirate setting, yeah. Again, I think at the time I was really into the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and I was like, I want to write a story centered on pirates. So I pitched that to him. He's like, go for it. And we haven't really seen too much of it so far in the story, but believe me, there is going to be a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean like stuff coming up in these last few chapters. It's going to be very fun, and I'm very excited to write it.
I look forward to that. That sounds very fun.
Oh, it's quite fun. Have you read the latest chapters so far?
I have. I think it was the third chapter, right, where they're coming across the town or the kingdom of Eris or Eris or something.
Right. Yeah, actually, this week I posted 2 more chapters.
Oh,
So, oh yeah, I'd say chapter 4 so far is the one Malaka liked the most out of all of them, and I definitely enjoyed the most writing because I think at the end of chapter 3, the pirates show up to the city and they start attacking, and chapter 4 immediately jumps into her going to deal with pirate ships. So if you can imagine that as the hook, a giantess going to fight a bunch of pirate ships, then there you go.
well, I can honestly tell those pirates it's not going to be like facing the Kraken. I think facing Sylvie's wrath would be a lot worse.
Oh, for sure.
But no, like after we're done here, I'm gonna have to get on Giantess World and read those chapters. I'm excited.
Yeah, they're starting to get like I feel like it's been a bit of a slow burn at first because I wanted to establish Roth as a new character because you just got to take time for these two. But now I'm starting to get into more of the action now that they're introduced with each other. We can kind of pick up the pace a little bit.
Right. And while we're talking about Malaka, I have to say this about him. I think one of his greatest attributes is he seems so open to other people's ideas, particularly you and I, because I mean, you can understand like a creator who made this world, made these characters. They'd naturally be very protective of them. Like they have a certain viewpoint. You know, what if somebody damages it? What if somebody doesn't understand? But I love how, you know, for you, he says, hey, go with the idea, like see if it goes with it. It's still kind of vague in my head, go with it. And he did the same thing for me when I suggested, what if I wrote a little bit about Alban's journey, like where he's going. And he definitely seems open to ideas while suggesting a couple things to me, like maybe going through flashbacks. And I think that that was a great idea because that can really highlight his grief, while he's missing Valerie, like trying to cope without Valerie, how he's got to get used to traveling by himself without, traveling, on a giantess's shoulder. Like,
Right.
I think, like since he's such a POV character, you get to see the world through his eyes. Maybe I think it's important to give him a little bit of a story, even though this one probably won't have a lot of giantess content in it. I still want to have echoes of it. Like you'll still see Valerie, you'll still, hear about Belena and Sylvie and maybe even a couple of other things. You never know.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree. It's neat that he's so open and to letting people write these stories. And every time I write a chapter, because how it works is I'll write the chapter, I'll message him on DeviantArt. I'll be like, all right, it's done. Go check it out because we have a Google Doc we share for it. He'll make a few small edits. Usually it's just like making the dialogue look a little bit better, or he fixes the spelling or something, because I tend to just go write the whole chapter all in one go and I don't really proofread it. So he's like the proofreader. And then, but every time I'm like, oh, he's not going to like this. He won't like this part here. He's probably going to edit this. But no, he's very, very rarely shot down a whole idea or something.
That really is awesome. And I do have to admit, like, a part of me is still a little bit intimidated writing for him because, again, like, I don't want to write anything that goes against the character of Alban, goes against the character of Valerie, and I don't know if my ideas, like, for this story are good, but hopefully, he's, like, very understanding, very, like, encouraging, like you say he is, and I'm trying to finish it, but I've been kind of going through a little bit of writer's block as well. Like how do I get to A to C to B? I mean, to how do I get from here to there? And what would be the most impactful? How could I get this across to the audience?
Right. Yeah. And I definitely have had moments like that where I'm like, okay, where do I go? But the biggest tip I can give there is always write get in the head of the character, because if you go to from A to B because it has to happen, it doesn't feel natural. That's not how everyday life works. How I get from A to B, and sometimes it'll change from A to C because the character wanted to do that instead. Because there's many times I'm like, okay, I want to do this, but the character would do this instead, so let's do that, and then we'll just see how we can get to where I want to be. And it feels a lot more natural that way. Like, Sylvie isn't going to go do this one thing just immediately. There's got to be a road to that. Maybe another character's decisions force her into that direction. Like, at one point she wanted to go back home, but then Roth's intentions kind of led her to Eris. So, it's always character driven is the best way to go with things like that.
Right. And I do kind of want it to like stay in Alban's perspective, even when we go through like flashbacks of like hopefully we get to see through his eyes like the actual wedding day. Like that's something that I wanted to see, Alban and Valerie get married. Maybe a part of maybe we see a scene where we see baby Belena and how hard it is being a miniature dad, and like does she take him seriously? Like, does she not? Like, like
Definitely, yeah.
I think maybe those could be a nice way to like highlight what he's going through then. And when it gets to the story's like climax or build up, hopefully it makes a lot of sense to him making this decision.
Right, yeah.
And something I wanted to get your opinion on. I know that you've been praising the video series that I've been doing on Vandan and everything, but With how I set it up, like using the photographs and especially the actresses and actors who I selected as the characters, um, I do have to ask: do you like those choices, or would you have made like different choices as opposed to the ones I made? I have to ask.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I like everyone who's in there, especially Valerie. I think Elle Fanning was a pretty good choice for her, and also I think Valerie was a pretty good choice. Alexandra Daddario, I think she looks great for what the younger Valerie, I believe, is what who she did.
I don't know if
But
you've I don't know if you've heard in the last podcast I did, but really the main reason I went with Alexandra Daddario and even Carla Gugino as Valerie, young and older Valerie. I just think
right,
they're attractive. I I know that in the story she's
yeah,
blonde, and I think I probably could have done. I could have selected certain actresses or models for that, but I just felt this feels appropriate. Can I make that change?
right, yeah. But yeah, overall, I think uh, they're all pretty good. Belena definitely isn't accurate, but I really like Haley Steinfeld, so I'm not going to complain. But I like how you mentioned like casting and stuff because uh, I started to think more about it, and every time I read a story, I'm like trying to imagine what it would look like in a movie setting. So like for me, I've got a whole list of who I could see in the roles.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am too. Like, based
Mm,
on like who I think would be good, or like maybe recent movies or television shows I've seen, and part of the reason why I chose Haley Steinfeld to play Belena, honestly, it was a photograph I was looking for to portray what was happening. I saw a picture of Elle Fanning, who I thought had to be Sylvie. Like that just had to be done. That had to be perfect casting.
right.
I saw her hugging Haley Steinfeld. Like I think they were like doing a photo shoot or something, and I'm like, hey, this makes my job easier. You know, they could pass as sisters, and Haley kind of resembles Alexandra or Carlos, their hair. So I thought, I think she could play a good Belena. She might not be the first choice, but I think she could be a good one.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. The images that you have from that for them is very fitting to the stories for sure. Um, but are you interested in hearing the people I had chosen before?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be very interested to hear what you think.
Yeah. As for Belena, it took me a little bit because like she's a redhead, which
Yeah.
when you look into redheaded actresses, a lot of them just don't really look the part. But are you familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia series?
I am. Were you thinking the actress who played what was it, Lucy? I think.
Yes, Georgie Henley, I think her name is. And nowadays, she looks pretty spot on, I'd say. There's not too many. She's not really been in any movies recently, though, which makes it a little difficult to find anything other than her
Right.
doing some kind of photo shoot. But I feel like if she were to actually be cast in the movie, she would be a pretty good fit. Um, for Sylvie, I really don't think there's anyone better than Elle Fanning. The only other person I could find was like Catherine Newton,
Oh
who's
yeah.
supposed to be I think she's supposed to be Stature in the new Ant-Man movie, and I think she has much more of the playful kind of face than Elle Fanning does. Elle Fanning looks a little more gentle, but I still think it's hard to pick anyone better.
Right.
But I guess that would be my only other option would be Catherine Newton. Um, Valerie, on the other hand, I thought I found someone who could match Alexander Daddario because I think you mentioned in the first podcast how her eyes kind of like it's like she's staring into your soul, like she's
Yeah.
seeing all of you. And I think Nicole Kidman kind of has that, and she also has the blonde hair. Now, you'd have to age her down for the early stories.
True.
But I think she has... She carries that look as well, I think. Because I think she was an Aquaman, and her character in there was, like, very noble. She was the queen. Like, I could see her fitting that as well. As for Albin, I don't really know of any better casting. I thought maybe like Bradley Cooper or Ryan Gosling. They look kind of
I can see those,
neat.
yeah.
Yeah. But going into ones that really haven't been done, well, actually, Valden, Timothy Chalamet, you got to put him in there somewhere. I think he looks very Prince-like, but he also has that annoyed at his sisters kind of look. Or at least annoyed at Sylvie. But as for Roth and Lorik, and especially Roth, because he hasn't been in there yet, I thought Thomas Brody Sangster would be a pretty good fit for him, at least how I view him in my head. I don't know if you're familiar with that actor.
I don't think I am.
He was in the Maze Runner series. And more recently, he was actually in The Queen's Gambit on Netflix. But he looks pretty close to how I imagine Roth would look. Let me see if I can find a good example of... I think this is pretty good. Let me actually send a picture in Discord here, just to give you an idea. But I like that look for him.
Oh, okay.
Obviously, without a business suit. But I think that's about what he would look like in my eyes. But if you found someone else who had kind of captured that look, that would work as well.
It's funny you mention that because when I was in the planning stage for preparing for Sylvie's travels, whenever you finish that, I was trying to think of who could play Roth, like somebody young, somebody who looks like he's been involved in a pirate life. And the first thought that came to my mind was maybe Orlando Bloom from Pirates, but I'm like, no, come on, you got to think outside the box. Everybody's going to expect that. Like, he might have a good look, he might have that fight, but I feel like I kind of have to break away from that. Like, don't go for the first thing you think of. Make it a little bit different, something people haven't seen.
Yeah, and of course Orlando Bloom's a lot older now, but I also feel like he's a little too clean to be Roth. Roth is the guy who's been through it.
Exactly.
Even though he's young, he's got to look like he's been through some stuff.
But yeah, I'm definitely going to take those pointers because I'm thinking of preparing for doing Sylvie's travels on my YouTube channel eventually. I don't know when, but I've actually talked with Lisa ASMR, who voiced Belena and Sylvie in Far From Home, and she's actually down to reprise Sylvie for this.
Oh, that's awesome. I really enjoyed her voice for the character. Obviously, I mean, I'm a fan of her channel. So just getting to see her voice a story I did, I was like, okay, whoa. I was a little starstruck, I guess. So.
Well, I was surprised how willing she was to do it because I've done collaborations with her before. We met each other once, I think, at Ball State. She was in a different graduation. She was she was a couple years behind me, but we met each other, but didn't really know like who the other person was until I started sending her letters and messages, like liking her Giantess ASMR stuff, and she's just I love how willing she is to help out. Like she has such a niceness about her that I thought I think that would be the perfect voice actresses for. I couldn't choose just one. Like I think she had to be both of them. Plus, it was easier to do. But I was glad that she was willing to do it.
Yeah, I think she did a great job, honestly.
And I'm glad you liked it too, because I think she made. I think she commented to you on the YouTube comments that, hey, like your stories are great, or at least you're a part of it.
Yeah, and just reading that, I was like, oh, that's so cool.
And sometime in May, she's going to be my next guest, so be sure to listen for that.
Oh yeah, that'll be cool.
Before I forget, I have to tell you this because I saw one of your reviews for I think either Malaka's story or I think somebody was making a review of your story. I think Far From Home or maybe a different one, and they were asking about how you guys met. And I love the metaphor that you attributed to the you and Malaka. How Malaka is kind of like George Lucas of the Van Dan
Mm,
stories, and you're sort of like Dave Filoni. Like you
yeah,
kind of match his spirit, you kind of match his writing, and you kind of work off of each other to get get these ideas across. I just love that metaphor.
yeah. And I'm glad that he responded to that quite well. Because yeah, that's really, I don't see any other way to view our relationship, because you know I'm such a fan of the first three stories, and I was, for the longest time, I wanted to see that one finished, and it just went so long without being finished. And I still remember, and I still have the first note I ever sent him on DeviantArt, because see, I wasn't on DeviantArt much. I didn't really have an account, so it was a pretty new account I had just made, and I didn't know he was on there. So I went to the story. I'm like, oh, what if I wrote it? I'm like, I'm not that great of a writer, but maybe I could try. So I was like, let's message him and just be like, hey, I'd like to write this. I was like, he's definitely either just not going to read it, or he's going to ignore it, or he's going to be nice and be like, hey, I appreciate it. But then, lo and behold, like, I remember waiting for the response. I was like, what if, like, I ended up writing this stuff? I was like, no, no, no. I'm thinking way too far ahead. I'm getting too hopeful. And then he's like, yeah, go for it. And he sent me all of the outline. He sent me the outline for Far From Home. I was like, oh shoot, this is actually happening. And yeah, it's just, it still always surprises me, like, that not only does he did did he let me uh do all this writing, but he seriously also enjoys it. uh I hope as much as I enjoy his stuff.
That's awesome. It kind of reminds me of when I first heard about him. Like I had the idea to do the videos on YouTube, and a part of me was thinking, should I contact him to like get his blessing? Like should I, at
Mm,
least let him know I'm doing it? That way I can get his stamp of approval. But I kind of went ahead and did it, and I'm like the whole time I'm thinking, what if he hears about it? What if he doesn't like them? What if he thinks they suck? What if he doesn't like the choices I made for the characters? And I was peering through DeviantArt because I heard he had a DeviantArt page there, and I wanted to check out like his stories, his pictures, and he had a post saying, "Hey, there's this channel on YouTube. I'm very flattered, and check it out. It's really great." And then I messaged him like that was me, and that kind of started off the working relationship, I guess you could say, with him. But it was I kind of had a
right.
moment like that too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But one of the reasons I bring it up is because I have to ask, in your opinion, if you think Malaka is like George Lucas and you're like Dave Filoni, does that make me kind of like Jon Favreau?
Yeah, I'd say so. That sounds like a natural extension of the metaphor.
Not to take any more like credit or like, well, I'm important too, but like I feel like with the three of us, I think maybe this is a really good reason why more and more people are able to read his stories, like get an idea of like what they are, helping get them out sooner and spread the word to more people.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I commented on the first podcast, like that we haven't seen this much collaboration for stories like this. Like, and I just have to reiterate that, like, I don't think I've ever seen a story that not only has got audio versions made of it, with like voice actresses and everything, but now like there's a whole podcast series going on now, where people can now like engage even more in these stories than you could with anything else on Giantess World. And I think that's just really neat.
And really, I did it because, you know, I just really love the stories so much. And even if we don't really reach that many people, if we have like an audience of like maybe a couple hundred, you know, like if it doesn't rise up, I'm fine with that. You know, at the very least, more people read it, more people are interested in it, they're listening, they're reading. And you know, like I don't really expect it to get bigger. It'd be awesome if it got bigger, if more people like heard about it and read it. But you know, I'm good with like everybody like listening to this, like even if it's just a, you know, like a small podcast, even if it's like a certain series that's only on my channel, like, hey, at least people are listening, and that's fine enough for me. It doesn't have to be big.
Yeah, and if it's just that one review or that one person says that like the story impacted them, and that's good for me. Like when I was listening to the first podcast and you talked about how much Far From Home meant to you to help you go through grief, like that really touched me. Like that's my goal with these stories. I'm not writing just to write an entertaining story. I'm not writing just to write whatever. I want to write stories that mean something to people, that create a positive impact. And just getting to hear like that, I was like, man, all right, there we go. I did it. I made something that was worth reading. And the same went for when I shared the story with a friend, and she checked it out, and she sent this like 5-paragraph essay to me talking about how much she loved, like how different it was. She was like, she was like, I never expected to see a story that treated its characters so well, and coming from two guys, she's like, man, that's impressive. She was just in awe of like how great the themes were and like how mature the story was for the setting it's in. And it just I'll go back and read her review of it, and I'm like, yeah, this is why I'm doing this, to create some positive stories anyone can read, and hopefully they can find some meaning in them.
Well, I think that's a tribute to both you and Malaka's talents. How, I mean, not only are you guys willing to like be on the same page and have the same spirit, because a lot of times when two writers work on a project, you could tell, you know, which writer's which. Like, oh, that sounds like something X would say. That sounds like something Y would say. It's different. It doesn't match. But for you guys, I feel it is a really good match. Like, you can't really tell like who did what, who edited this, who added that. But I really love the passion that you put into it, like how descriptive it is. It seriously got to a point where, you know, the characters of this story felt like family to me. It's like they've touched me that deeply. And I know some people might hear that and say, oh, come on, it's just a story. But it's like, hey, to me, it just represents a lot. It means something special. And I think that's why storytelling is so powerful. Like, a lot of people should, you know, really check them out, because you can really have an amazing emotional experience with it.
Oh yeah, and I distinctly remember listening to this video essay where someone talked about how people can take it too far sometimes with characters, how they can write like death threats to actors for doing something they didn't like. But I think as long as you're not doing that, and you can just be invested in characters, like it's powerful stuff. Like, you get so connected to these people, and I remember so many times where I got invested in movie series and someone dies, and I'm like, it's heartbreaking. Like, you just get attached to these people. You get to be inside their heads. You get to go through what they're going through, and it really does feel like they're real people at some points.
Even though at first it shocked me when you and Malaka made that choice in Far From Home, a part of me was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that. You know, like, how am I going to process this? How am I going to get past it? I had a brief flash of Kathy Bates from Misery. Like, do I just hunt them down? Do I tell them, redo the story, resurrect her? Do I go complete like crazy fan on you guys? But I'm able to see that as, hey, like at some point it probably had to happen, even though Valerie is, a powerful giant, she's still mortal. And I think whether, she died, whether Alban died, I think, hey, it's very powerful storytelling. And I think that's something that people have to be faced with, that sometimes it's inevitable and it comes out of nowhere and you have to prepare for it.
Yeah, and when he sent me the outline for the story, that was like one of the big things he wanted. He's like, it has to have another giant in it, and then it has to have what happens. I was like, oh boy. And as I went through the story, he let me include like the city they run into. That was all my idea. The bandit lord that they dispose of at first, that was all my idea. But then when you get to the second half of the story, that's his area. So when I got to writing that, I remember messaging him and being like, I'm not ready to write this. He's like, I can do it. I'm like, oh, no, I can do it. I'm just like, emotionally, it's taken a lot to prepare myself.
Right.
And when I finally got there, I was like, man, ugh. Like, I just wrote the ending to a character who's been around for 10 years. I was like, how do I process that?
Well, I think people need to understand that. Like, I know that, like they think authors, oh, you're in control of your world. Like, you don't care who lives or dies just for story beats. But it's like, no, like they grow attached to these characters too. It's like, it's not easy for us. You think we want to do this? You think we don't want them to live forever? It's like, it's hard on us too. Give us a break.
Yeah, and going into the story knowing what had to happen, I definitely tried to focus on like building her character even more. That's why I included like her original like flashback to her being shrunk and put under that spell, and I thought that was a really nice scene to include.
Oh yeah.
And just adding in all this stuff, getting to reflect on her. Like, I'm sure some people saw it coming. Like, oh man, you were focusing so much on the past and like hoping to get home, but I think I tried to make it seem like Alban was going to die. I was like, let's try and like make it we're not sure what's going to happen. But I think it was, I don't know, it definitely is a good way to move the story along. It's natural, and it was in a way that like she is doing it for other people, and it's like I feel like that's just the ultimate goal for her is to help others, and she did it. And I think that there's no a better way it could have happened, and that's because he chose like that's how it was going to happen for her. I was like, yeah, this works, and I hope I did it justice.
Absolutely, it definitely makes sense with her character, and I gotta tell you, like, I thought that's what was gonna happen too. Like, maybe the giant like finds him and kills him, and she has to live with that. And I even imagine what his funeral might look like. How everybody's gathered, like Valerie sits on her giant throne in black, maybe like crying, and Belena and Sylvie are kind of heartbroken. Everybody that you've met previously, but I feel like that's what people would expect. Like, people wouldn't really expect Valerie to go because, again, she's big and strong and powerful. Like, they just assume, oh, nothing can stop her. But again, you realize, hey, she's still, vulnerable. She's still human, anybody could go.
Yeah. And I think adding in the that king's son that ends up, it's funny because he ends up like telling him like, oh yeah, she's gone. But the only reason that scene happened is because I forgot he was there when I was writing. So when I got after the chapter, I was like, oh wait, he's there, and he fell off the cliff too. Shoot. But it just went to show like she, even with her last dying breath, she saved one more person, and I think that worked well for my ignorance and forgetting him.
Well, yeah, like I think that was a nice touch, and in my head, in a perfect world, I guess you could say, I kind of wish her last moment was with Alban, but
right.
But because I think partially that's kind of why I wanted to tell Alban's journey, because I wanted him to have a moment of maybe getting in a last word, whether he's like speaking to her like in spirit, or like, you know, talking to himself, trying to make peace with it, or if he talks to her ghost, who knows. I kind of want him to have that moment where he's able to get peace from her death, because even though he's grieving, I wanted to highlight how it's still hard for people to move forward. Like, even if he made peace with it, like,
Oh
you still
yeah.
think about it, you know, like you still get sad on their anniversaries, you know, places you've been. It's like you can't help but remember, like, you're always going to suffer in some way after grief. And
Oh
I
yeah.
kind of wanted to touch upon that complication of grief in this story, and hopefully it comes out naturally and also works well with the characters and their stories.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited to see what you come up with there. It sounds like it'll be pretty fun to write. Um, I'm not sure if it would be able to be posted with everything else. If I mean, it will have some Giantess content in there, but
Oh, it
the
definitely
more
will.
story, yeah, but the more stories you get with like Valden or Alban themselves, it'll be really tough to include it in that. But
Absolutely.
I hope if you posted it, maybe on DeviantArt instead, people would be invested enough in the rest of the stories to be like, okay, I'll just follow these characters without any other of the content that the other stories have. I think that'll be a testament to how well everyone's written.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out like some story beats and some chapters, and I also got to send it to Malaka for a review. So
Yeah.
hopefully once I take care of that, I'll get it going.
Hmm.
I did want to ask you though, Acrophite, other than trying to finish Sylvie's travels, are there other projects that you have lined up in the future?
Yes, yes. One of the biggest ones I have that I've rewritten for the past probably 15 years. I've posted the story and then I've deleted it, posted it, deleted it, because I always read back. I'm like, nah, this sucks. And it's my main character, my main superhero character, Acrophite. She's this size changing superhero who has she started off as like my other superhero's love interest,
Yeah.
but she has gone through so much character development over the years that now they just can't be together. It would never work. So I think that shows like how much I've worked on her character. But that's something I'd really like to work on once I figure out a way for it to be unique and I don't know, still have some of your classic giantess action in there. And who knows, I still might include a romance for her. But I would definitely like to make something with her in it this year before I do any more Vandan sequels. And she's actually my profile picture pretty much everywhere is her.
I was
And
gonna
I'm
ask
hoping,
you. I was gonna ask you if
yeah,
that's supposed to be her, the icon that you use on Discord.
yep, yep. And of course, my name everywhere is just kind of a extension of what her name is. So she's Acrophy, I'm Acrophite,
Gotcha.
which the name, the naming for her is kind of interesting because I like to use different languages to come up with names. So, or just different meanings of words. So atrophy, of course, has a meaning, and then ascend has its own meaning. So I was like, all right, let's mix them because atrophy I think is like kind of a shrinking kind of thing, uh, and of course ascending that's getting bigger, I guess. So I was like, at acrophy, I was like, okay, that works, sure. Which I guess so now the word has its own meaning, I guess. So acrophyte would be like a lover of size things. So there you go.
Nice little piece of trivia there. I did not know that.
Yes, yes, it was a lot of word stuff, but I think now I've got quite a unique name. It's
It,
not just like, oh, Giantess fan 101. It's something that you can remember a little more easily.
I like that. You make a unique name for yourself.
Yeah. So that's the major project I'll have this year, along with my two other stories that I'm going to force myself to finish, whether I like how the story's going or not. I don't want to leave them unfinished. So the Cursed Child should be wrapping up at some point, and then Gene and Lil, which is a very different story than what a lot of people are used to, where it's a tiny woman instead, which is something I more recently got interested in. So I'll see how that goes.
That definitely would be different. I don't think a lot of people would, really think about that. Like they're so used to like the giant female and the human male. I think, how could that work? That you kind of have to think outside the box on that one.
Definitely, but I've had a lot of fun with it so far. You get a lot of borrowers type of action in it
Oh yeah.
because she has to fend for herself, and even though not great with art, I'd like to try and find someone who could do art for her, because I imagine like she's wearing like these action figure clothes that are kind of simple, but she also like over time starts to get little, like maybe a needle as like a sword that she uses to defend herself, like she's got like it's strapped to her or something. It's quite fun.
That kind of reminds me of the Secret World of Arietti from
Yeah,
Miyazaki. Like I couldn't help but picture that, like the needle for a sword and everything.
yeah. So it's little stuff like that I'm finding to be quite fun to write. Like I think a scene I did in the last chapter, she ends up, because she's quite good with engineering, so she ends up tearing apart this drone, and she like uh changes the wiring and everything to where she can strap herself to it and like control it and fly it around, and she flies around the house. It's like, that's fun. That's really fun. I would do that if I knew how to tear apart wiring.
Okay, that sounds like a fun scene to read.
It was quite fun. She zooms around, crashes into a few things, makes a mess. I think in the first chapter, I also had her making dinner, which was an incredibly hard chapter to write, because I'm like, okay, she can't do this. How's she gonna get across this? It's like, man, this is hard for her to do.
That sounds pretty awesome. I look forward to reading that as well.
Yeah, it's quite fun. I think it's 3 chapters on there so far. Eventually, there'll be more.
Well, we're about out of time, but before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you this question, just to make sure we leave on a really good note. I asked Malaka this, but I wanted to ask you, what do you love most about your life?
Yeah. Right now, I really like um I don't, everything so far. Like just recently, I moved into my first house renting, and it's pretty cheap rent. And then at my job, I'm getting a new promotion where I'm going to be going from factory work to doing an office job, which I think would fit me a lot more. So right now, I'm just like, I've got plenty of money to go around. I'm buying some collectible kind of stuff that I like. It's just it's very laid back for now. I'm not starting a family yet. I'm kind of on my own with my brother, so it's a it's just a nice point in life to be at. I have a lot of freedom right now.
It definitely sounds like it is, and like I mentioned before, I really appreciate your addition, or not addition. I appreciate you taking part in creating the Vandan stories. I like your take on them. I love how you're helping spread the word, and you definitely seem like someone who has a lot of passion for this area, this theme, and I also really appreciate your art on DeviantArt as well.
Yeah. Thank you. That really does mean a lot. To hear that people have enjoyed what I've made, and like I said before, like I'm trying to uh, put something into people's lives that's meaningful.
And I think a lot of people appreciate that, whether it's a good story, whether it's a very nice piece of art to look at. I think every now and then people need some of that, to help offset the chaos of life.
Right. I definitely agree.
But thanks for being on the podcast. Thanks for being a guest. I really, really appreciate it. And it was really nice getting to know you more.
Yeah, and thank you. I really enjoyed this.
But it's good talking to you again. You have yourself a really great weekend, and take care, Acrophite.
Yeah, take care. Thank you again.
Thanks. All right, everybody, you heard it here. That was Acrophite, one of the co-writers of the Vandan series. Really happy to have him aboard. Really excited that he agreed to be a guest here. Just to let you guys know who are interested in the next couple of episodes, I plan to interview Lisa ASMR, and I also plan to interview Tanny ASMR. They were voice actresses who worked with me on making the Vandan video series on my YouTube channel. I don't know which ones I'll be able to get to first or second. I think I'm gonna get Lisa ASMR first. I'm not exactly sure. I'm still talking to Tanny, trying to plan something out with her, but they should be out before the end of next month, next May. So be on the lookout for that. Keep an eye out on my YouTube channel. And thank you guys for listening. This has been the Podcasters of Vandan.